it's Dan. The Novillo person in your life. I'm going to do a quick video here, quickish, on the process of creating a new project in Novillo. So Novillo projects are based on GitHub, and you can see the homepage for GitHub. I put that up on the screen here. It's an online repository tool, and software developers use it a lot to store files and track changes in complex projects where there are lots of files. And while it's really unfamiliar to most creative people, those features are what makes it really actually very useful for a project like Novillo. So it's the basis for what Novillo is. So I'm going to come back to GitHub in this explainer. Let's take a look at what it takes to create a new project in Novillo. So I've emptied Novillo of all the previous projects, including the test one that we looked at a lot in the previous videos. And I'll now start the app up, and you'll see that when I do, it basically has just one option, and that is create a new project. So this, of course, is the development screen. It'll get more elaborate as time goes on, but we'll kind of go forward from there. I clicked on that option, and what we can see is it's giving me the choice of giving my new project a name. So I'll go ahead and I'll let it, I'll give it a name, which I'll just call like my new project or whatever. And when I do that, it will take us here. So this form is the next thing we're going to deal with, and it's the time when GitHub starts to become part of the process of creating your new Novillo. So I'm going to step out now, and we're going to go back to GitHub and take a look at what GitHub is. This is my homepage for my account, which is called Urbanistica, and there is a listing here of my most frequently visited repositories, and it includes one in the lower right corner called SVG images. So I'll just click on that, and it will take us into that repository. And what you see is just a listing. It's not complicated. It's the same thing you see on your hard drive any day that you go look at a listing to find a file. When I open that repository up, I can see there's basically a folder structure, as I said, and there's different file types that are specific to this repository that I put in there. There's some SVG files, an MD file, an HTML file, and so forth. Some of them are files that won't be used by Novillo, but they can still exist in there. There's also a folder, so we can go in and take a look at that folder. And if I click on that folder, it might take a second here, what we'll see is just more files. These are mostly SVG files. We can even go to one of the files and click on it and see a preview of it. And if you've been watching these videos, this is an image you've seen before. So just make a mental note that that's there. All right, so where are these files coming from? Well, let's take a peek at a folder on my hard drive. So I'm pulling that in here, and you can see that in this directory, there is a folder called SVG images. It has the same name as my repository. And you're not going to be completely shocked at what you see here, but basically in that folder, you'll see that the same files exist in the repository. So they're actually copies of each other. There's one exception, which is not important for the moment. We can also take another look in the folder that's inside there, and we'll see that it's also the same contents as we saw in the repository. Where's that happening? There we go. So that's open now. And in fact, if we go there and click on that same file and ask the Mac to preview it, same file again. So we get the very clear idea. This is kind of belaboring it, but you get the idea. This is the same set of files in two different places, one of them on a repository online and another one on my hard drive. Great. Okay, now that we understand that, we won't be doing that again, don't worry. We're back to the starting point for our new Novillo project. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide the name of my account, which is to say Urbanistica, and I'm going to provide the name of the repository, and I'm going to say create. When I do that, we end up in a quite familiar place from all the other videos where we can now select from the projects that are available and confirm, and I'll just do that now. So let me just grab that one, say yes, I want to open it, and it'll deposit us in the project with a couple of changes from what we've seen before, which I'm going to talk about. In the time that it took for that click to happen, Novillo went off to GitHub on its own and found out what was in that repository because we gave it the information about it. And what it's noticed is that there's a difference between what's in the repository, which is, or in the repository, which is the files we saw, and what's in the project, which is basically nothing yet because it's just been created. And it points out to us that there's a difference and says, do you want me to update this Novillo in order to line it up with what's in that GitHub repository? And in this case, of course, and usually you want to say yes. So when we do that, you'll notice that there's a media listing up at the top there in the palette, has nothing in it at all, right? So we're going to have to refresh the media listing button by clicking on it again. So we'll do that. And there you go. You can see there's a full listing of all of the images that we saw in the repository, no longer in a hierarchical folder structure, but just as a flat structure, but with the names of the folders that they belong to included in the name. And that's it. Basically, if what we wanted to know is what were the things that you needed to do to create a project, you've just done them all, or you've just seen them all done. One flaw we'll notice right away is that if we select one of these images in the media list, it won't display. Basically restart the application, which I'll do here. And when we do, reselect that project, confirm we want to join it. Now if we click on one of the images, there it is, and it displays properly. I'm going to add this now to a block. Well, it turns out that when I create a Novillo, it creates a default block that's already there for me to use. So we'll see that if we go now to the Blocks tab. And there it is. It's called Default. We can rename it. And if we select that one and we go back to the media, we can select our image, say Add to the block, and when we return to the block, there are the images embedded inside of it. We can do the same thing with a composition. We were going to show this in a previous video. We didn't. Let's take a look at it now. It's also created a default composition. When we go back to the block, select the block we just added the image to, and say Add to Comp, when we return to the composition, now we have the image integrated into the composition. And from here, the process would simply be to add threads, add events, and start editing, changing the attributes in various ways. That's it. It's a pretty simple process. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video informative. It maybe makes this a little more seem like Novillo is a tool that you would be using one day, and I certainly hope so. If you have any questions, of course, throw them into any comments you have on the wherever you're seeing this, YouTube, Instagram, etc. Dan Donaldson, the creator of Novillo, a guy who has a preeminent position in the Novillo world, and also a guy who's wasted a decade of his life doing a graphic novel that he couldn't bear to finish without Novillo, and that's where we're going. But soon it'll be for YouTube. Okay, that's enough. Goodbye.